All right, we're back. Episode 2, RBSL GM Rankings 2132. It's time to get a little deeper into the weeds. We're covering the middle of the rankings today, and the middle is a little disappointing. I alluded to it in the last episode. It feels like we still have a bunch of GMs who are like AFK, trash, but by the end of this episode, I think we're going to get to a point where we're talking about good GMs, so that'll be very fun. So let's talk less and let's rank more, starting with your actual living, breathing GMs at 21. Doc. Doc has pretty infamously fallen off one of the tallest cliffs in the world. Man is still falling. You can look at our lovely statistics breakdown on the right side of your screen, and you can see Doc has made the playoffs once in the last 14 seasons. Now, if you look before then, you'll see Doc has quite a lot of very credible results. In fact, it's one of the more impressive dichotomies in the league. A GM who has been so successful, followed by such failure. And the thing is, we'll see this in some other GMs that we'll cover today, but with Doc, the difference is Doc was around and trying the whole time. Doc has caught some bad breaks. He's been quad jumped. But at the same time, Doc has also not won more than 44 games in the last 15 seasons, which is absolutely unacceptable. That's the type of stats, if we just look at the stats from 21-18 on, it's the type of shit that would put Doc in the circle of suck. And in fact, we could argue Doc is in the circle of suck as he has displayed that exact attribute of getting good rookies on rookie contracts and doing nothing with them. Doc just sold out this last season to try and make the playoffs, flopped completely, didn't own his own pick. That level of hubris and ignorance is a terrible sign. I'm hoping Doc will pull himself together, but it really does. Doc's the only GM who I've truly questioned whether or not going to the finals the first 3 times in those earlier years was actually a fluke. Because, looking back, the Zupan finals was just like one of the most unexplainable occurrences ever. And if you eliminate that, and I'm not saying I've totally eliminated it. Doc is 21, he's not 30. Doc had one good team 30 seasons ago, and other than that, he was nothing, right? That's basically how you could explain the Clippers. So with all of that, Doc finds himself much lower than he has been. I think Doc infamously, I don't know if I put him at number 1. Obviously, he was the god tier GM. He was number 2 or 3, I think. This was right after those finals when I had just joined the league. I was obviously very excited. It's been nothing but free fall ever since then. Doc is he's in a weird purgatory state. He absolutely has nothing ready for a team right now. It's going to take 3 more years of tanking probably for Doc to pull it all together. But if he does, he could bring back, maybe he could gain some of that belief that he can put a good team back together again. But until then, Doc, welcome to the bottom, baby. It's a party down here. Number 20, Shane. Shane's a weird one. Shane is basically inactive. In terms of the stats you can see, after the Chuck D era ended in 21-19, Shane basically quit the league. He's one of these GMs who, while he's around every season to make his draft pick and give us that sexy Philly accent, other than that, he does nothing, and his statistics reflect that quite well. He won 48 games once and lost promptly in round 1. Hasn't really done anything else. His team is kind of shit right now. I expect some more missed playoffs to be coming. How much credit does Shane deserve as a GM? I always felt I think it wasn't me. I think the general league consensus is that Chuck D carried that team, and that finals victory in 21-15 was the single greatest run by a player ever to win a championship. I mean, the stats that man put up to win that ring, it was freaking ludicrous. So Shane is one of those guys who I felt was a very big beneficiary of the RNG, which is why, despite the fact we're talking about a guy who's gone to the finals twice and won a ring, and went to the playoffs 10 years in a row, all Shane really did was tank, get the first pick the obvious guy who should do it, and then ride him to the ring. Shane did some other moves around Chuck D, so it wasn't like Paul levels of autopilot, but it was a lot closer to Paul levels of autopilot than something that we would see from a top tier GM. So it's that good RNG luck, plus the fact that he didn't make the playoffs. Like, his playoff consistency was terrible. The man had 60 win teams and lost in round one twice. And combined with the fact that now he's AFK and is not playing the game, it's just there's a really bad look when you put it all together. So Shane, number 20, another guy I would love to come back to the high level of activity into the league. Shane, let's go. Number 19, the one and only Mr. Meh himself, Jesse. Jesse is kind of at a focal, not a focal point, a fork in the road, excuse me. So traditionally, as we all know, before Svatos came around, Jesse was contending for the number 30 slot in the league. Svatos came, Jesse tried to build a team around him. There's really two ways you can look at it. One way you can look at it is that he wasted Svatos' career. The other way you can look at it is it was the best era in Cavaliers history, unless you go all the way back to like Fast Break 2, where I think Jesse won a ring. But again, I'm only considering since I've been in the league. So I think I'm on the side that the Svatos was almost certainly wasted. Jesse infamously had a 68-win team that lost in round one. That's pathetic. But then on the flip side, Jesse did make a conference finals with Svatos, a very aging Svatos, but still conference finals with only 45 wins. Welcome to the East, right? So I think, Jesse has been really a beneficiary of the rest of the league getting worse. I don't think Jesse has gotten any better. I think Jesse is pretty bad, but he plays the game. He's more active than you think, and he didn't trade Svatos. He kept him. He tried to build around him. He made it past round one a few times. While none of that is super impressive, it's better than everything we've seen in these previous GMs. And that's combined with the fact that Jesse still plays the game. Jesse is low-key building a team right now. I don't think I love it. I don't really love any Jesse team. But because he is trying, that puts him above some of these GMs who seem incapable of doing so. So 19 for Jesse. It's still not the top half, but this is basically the big time for Jesse at this point. Well fucking done. Keep it up. 18, Alex. Since Alex joined the league, he's done basically nothing. He makes a lot of moves, but that does not mean he makes a lot of progress. Alex is probably most famous for missing the playoffs in 21-17 with 49 wins in his first attempt. He's since gone on to make the playoffs. He even made it out of round one once. But, Alex is an interesting one where I don't even think there's been a ton of bad luck for Alex. It's really just been bad decision making. But there's no disputing the fact that Alex's activity level has been super high and makes me want to think that Alex could do better. Alex is in this weird place where he won a ring before I was in the league, I believe. And even though he only won it because Palm cheated for him, he seems to think that gives him credibility, so he doesn't try now. Hey, whatever makes you happy. I would love it if we really got a focused Alex for a couple seasons. Yes, Derek Hoffman was good, but I don't count that as a full focused Alex. So, I as much as Alex is just vile and annoying in the chat and won't shut up and tries to be a lawyer, I actually think he's got a lot of skills that could be good in the RBSL, and he's intentionally choosing to not channel them. So this is a bit of a potential based rating for me. Alex, by the stats, should probably be more like 22. But I guess I'm a sucker for high activity guys, something like that. So Alex at number 18, going on number 17, Jason. Look, Jason is barely in the league. I don't expect Jason to stay. I'm glad he's here. It's great to have him back. Jason is a legend from before I was in the league. That's not part of his ranking here, obviously, because he is put here at 17. When I was in the league, Jason was okay. I think I classically rated him between 10 and 15 in the previous GM rankings. I'm notching him back because he clearly is just not as invested in trying as hard anymore. But unlike a lot of these GMs before who are either completely asleep at the wheel or are very, very bad, Jason is almost pure neutral. So I think I'm giving Jason a little cred from previous era. I'm marking it back a little bit because this is just, we're not getting the full Jason. I mean, he came in, he traded everybody on the Suns. in a quick, very nice manner. So like there was that little burst of activity, but I'm not really expecting the Suns to be anything more than a ghost ship at this point. So if Jason stays, maybe he'll go down more and he'll represent this new not active Jason, or maybe he'll become active again and be the Jason that could be like maybe like 10, 11, 12 ranking like he was back in the day. We'll just have to stay and find out. But I'm just along for the ride. Glad he's here in the chat talking shit about Fendi, just like the good old days. On to 16, Tim. Tim is actually kind of who I consider true neutral for the RBSL. If you look at Tim's stats, Tim goes to the playoffs a little more than he doesn't. Tim has made it to round 2 more like a notable amount of times. I think like 5 or 6 times. He made the conference finals once. He's consistently winning between 40 and 50 games. How's he done it? Nothing super impressive. Tim has had a few notable draft picks. He's had some pretty notable TC luck. I think the overall sentiment in the world is that Tim is one of the luckier TC people. Michael Campbell is the ultimate example of this, although there are other players that I'm not remembering that have kind of been big shocks to come out of the Hornets training camps. They're just putting those guys on that good sugar water. Maybe Zach Gibbs was a Hornet at one point and he popped off. I don't know. There's someone better than that. But that's not the point. Tim doesn't really do a lot of activity. Tim holds on to teams way too long. I don't think Tim holds on to teams way too long because he thinks the teams can win, like we'll get to with some of these better GMs who I think are trying harder and still not succeeding. I think for Tim, the problem is just that he is like low activity. He's not low activity to the point where he literally disappears for seasons at a time, but like Tim is the type of guy, like I think this actually happened with Michael Campbell. Tim needed to trade Michael Campbell. Tim like knew he needed to trade Michael Campbell and he wanted to. Kojamaka, that's the other guy who came out of the Hornets that was really money, TC darling. Anyways, Tim really needed to trade Michael Campbell. He needed to do the same thing with Maka. Tim knew it. It just took him 3 seasons to trade the guys because he's just indecisive, not super active, disappears for weekends at a time or weeks at a time, excuse me. So all of that combined, I think if Tim was like a little more to the point, concise with his decision making, Tim could be a solid GM. I don't really think Tim has championship capability, but he could be better. But the cool thing about Tim is I think he's found a level of activity where he can consistently do this forever with the league, and that's what we're looking for. Guys who figured out how to have fun. So hey Tim, if you can have fun only winning 45 games a season, more power to you. I could never do it like that, but not all of us are destined for greatness. Okay, we're to the next tier. So a lot of these GMs I just covered are still pretty low activity. They've been good maybe in the past, but now they really just exist. Like I said, they're living and they're breathing, but not much more. Now we're getting to the GMs who actually try. They're not quite good enough. They're one step behind in the game, but they try. So I respect them for that, but I also make fun of them for trying and failing. So at the bottom of this tier, we got Null. So Null came into the league, and he had big plans. The problem with his big plans is that he took them from Evan, and that's a terrible place to get your plans from. Null tanked for, I don't know if I actually got Null's first season right. It might have been 21-20. It doesn't matter. I think it's representative of Null. Null came into the league. He tanked hard. After tanking, during the tank, he drafted Zealy. He drafted Bam. He famously ended the tank by trading for Trent Lamb from Evan in what I think was a giant overpay and was a little silly. He made a conference finals, and then it all kind of blew up in his face. Null's problem was he basically assumed the classic Evan hubris in thinking that his team could win a championship when it couldn't. And just like kept holding on. Like the number of times Null to me into the main chat was like, no, Zealy will come through. He's got this. This is like unbelievable. Zealy never came through. The team never came through. Like, all he needed to do was replace Zealy with some elite defender. And I think this could have been a team that could have won a ring. I mean, look, Bam was a good draft pick. Guys like Bam don't come around every day. Zealy's trade value was out of control high, even though Zealy is not as good as everybody thinks he is. He's got super enticing attributes. People were slobbering for him. So it's just, it was just the patience, the thinking you're better than the league. I don't think Noel necessarily thought that outright, but that's definitely the way it came across. I think there's a subconscious factor where Noel really believed in his plan more than people who were more experienced trying to tell him that it was a shit plan. And it failed. But again, this is Noel's first build. Nobody does well with their first build. This is about as good as it gets. And it's good enough to get Noel a 15 ranking in the GM rankings. Like, he made the conference finals. He tried something. It worked. Noel at least actively cares about his team and tries to get better, even if it is misguided. You got to respect that. Noel, I think because there's only 29 or 28 GMs, this technically still puts Noel in the bottom half, but he's very close. Next, we got Jack, another favorite of the RBSL main chat, always here for the memes. Jack is a lot like Noel. He's been around. I didn't capture all of Jack because there's a Bucks era before this where Jack was around. But it's not all that different than what we see here. I think he went to round 2 once or twice. Jack always tries to sell out. It always seems to go wrong. I do cut Jack just ever so slight amount of slack because in 21-30 last season, or 2 seasons ago, I guess, because this season just ended, Cartier gets hurt in the conference finals. Jack should have arguably had a shot to go to the finals, but at the same time, you had a 53-win team, dude. If you aren't in the mid-60s, I'm just not going to feel all that bad that you didn't have playoff success. It's cool that he outperformed his regular season then, but Jack has never put together a 60-win squad. He always wants to. He's got the activity level. He just can never seem to find the good deals anywhere, whether it's in free agency, whether it's in trades. Jack always seems to get a little too attached to certain ideas and then overpay rather than remaining flexible, looking for deals where they're available and building his team around where the value's at. That seems to be always the problem with Jack. He's about to enter a pretty large tank cycle. Self-admittedly, he sold out all his picks for this current iteration of a team. Now he's got Ariel Jones and Jason Cartier and Glenn Smith all as free agents, I think, and he's got to re-sign some of them. Let me see. I'm going to look it up really quick. His contract situation is bad. He's got just a lot of dudes that are going to want max. Okay, he does have Glenn Smith. Oh, but Glenn Smith's already on a super max. So really, Jack is going to have to kill his cap to keep this team around for one more year, and they're all old. Glenn Smith is 29, or Glenn Smith is 30. I think Cartier is 30. And the one other dude, I forgot his freaking name. Doesn't matter. Jack's team is aging. It's going to get ugly. Ariel Jones. Ariel Jones is starting to get old. He's very athleticism based. So it was cool to see Jack put in some effort. Again, 2 conference finals, looks good. The statistics say he was way worse. He went to the conference finals with 47 wins and 53 wins. I think this speaks to the very low quality of the East in the modern era since Max left in the last 10 seasons or so. It's just not very good. So Jack did capitalize, but I also just don't the clout of winning or making a conference finals in the West is completely different than the clout of making a conference finals in the East right now. You have to be a killer to make the conference finals in the West, but to make the conference finals in the East, not that impressive. So Jack, right at the halfway point, 14. Next, and maybe rounding out this section, or maybe we have one more GM, is a bit of a guy who's been in incognito mode, just chilling, in Kyle. I don't even need to say Kyle L anymore because other Kyle, Timberwolves, left, and nobody calls Idwin Kyle. So Kyle has been just kind of chilling, making playoffs, a little bit at a worse clip than in previous iterations. Obviously, Kyle was kind of infamous for being the original, not even churn guy, but just high longevity, always making the playoffs. You can see from 2096 to 2114, Kyle made the playoffs every season except for 2, and he went to round 2 a ton. I think he went to round 2 or farther definitely more than he went to round 1. So that's very impressive achievement. And a lot of Kyle being ranked 13 is predicated off of that. In more recent iterations, although Kyle has drafted or has had some interesting players, guys like Sofronio Dubino, he hasn't really done much with it. He won 61 games in one season, but lost in round 2. 60. Anytime you're over 60, I consider that a pretty successful season. Obviously, you hate to see those teams not make it to like conference finals, but it happens. So recent Kyle, it's kind of unclear what is wrong with him. Like, it seems like he has some pretty high talent players. He's got dudes like Chuck McKenzie and Clark Schweitzer, who, I mean, Kyle was getting these high draft picks. I don't know if they were number 1 overall, but they were definitely top 3 picks. And yet these teams don't seem great. So Kyle is kind of fallen into not quite active enough, I want to say. It feels like there's a lot of value in his players right now. When you look at his team page, it's like there are these prospects that you feel like could totally be sold, but I'm not sure if they're the right guys for him to build around. And maybe if he was making some moves, he could pivot into doing quite well. That's what's holding him back from being kind of in the tier of GMs that are actually good. I still think we're in kind of, right now we're in this weird neutral zone of GMs. So he gets the bump above guys like Noel and Jack, who even though they've had a little more recent success, I don't consider their recent success all that impressive. Like, Noel had to tank 6 seasons to get there. Jack sold out to win 53 games. So Kyle is a little more consistent. I'm definitely looking to see Kyle just try a little harder. It feels like activity is what's missing for Kyle. He's just like got to fill in the empty space with trades that make sense for his team rather than sitting on these players, because all that's going to happen is their contracts are going to get worse. People might die from TC. And like right now, when I look at Kyle's team, it just seems like there's so much value in the players, and there's not a lot of teams that will have that. That's an asset you got to utilize. So we'll see. Kyle's at a turning point. Kyle is almost certainly going way up or way down in the rankings based on his next iteration. He's either going to be Doc Light, or he's going to go back to the old Kyle and be like kind of that like near 10 ranking, I suspect. So all right, yeah, we do have one more. Number 12, Dave. Dave was right on the border between the next tier and this tier, and he will be closing out this episode. Dave, the grandfather of the RBSL, essentially, while you could never truly capture everything he's done for the league. What we can capture is his quality as a GM, and it's only okay. Dave is the type of guy, he's always making the playoffs. He's very rarely going deep into the playoffs. I think the best Dave has ever done is that one time he went to the conference finals with Mike Hammond, where he was running the 32-16 split, or was it 24-24, where he had like 5 guys playing 32 minutes, and then the bench 5 playing 16, or it might have been 24 and 24. Either way, it was just like a very weird team, but it worked. It looked good. He won 60 games with that team. It is very representative of who Dave is as a GM. Dave strikes me as a GM who thinks he's too cool to just play consistently and win games. He's always looking for weird ways to play, which is totally fair. Hey, fun comes first. I think Dave is looking for fun out of the game. He's been in the league for a goddamn eternity, so I understand. But the price you pay when you try to have too much fun and get wacky with it is you don't win a lot of games. And Dave's most recent stint that's captured here in your statistical breakdown on the right side of your screen with the Pistons has been a lot of that. Dave hasn't won 50 games once. He's really been in like weird round 1 purgatory, which, if you know, in my previous GM rankings, how I feel about, winning games, I really feel that 49 is good, but really like 50 is kind of like the arbitrary barrier I put between a good team and a bad team. If you're between 30 and 50 wins, you're usually doing something wrong. And every single season except one in Dave's stint with the Pistons falls under one of those seasons, which is unfortunate. If Dave will just not trade players arbitrarily when he doesn't need to, like why did Dave trade Gaknick? I have absolutely no idea. The man was a fantastic player. Why did Dave trade Alfonso Criado? I don't know. He was a fantastic player. It just feels like if Dave sticks with these ideas a little longer perhaps, or is a little more discerning. Dave strikes me as the type of guy who makes up his mind and then like executes on it. Why? I don't know. It's just like I think he feels like he takes pride in doing what he says in a league full of people who love to back out and be smarmy. So like with Gaknick, like Dave going into the main chat one day and he's like, I'm trading Gaknick. Dave didn't need to trade Gaknick if there wasn't a good enough offer. but Dave's mind was made up. He was going to commit to it, and he absolutely did that. And well, first of all, I don't think Dave took the best Gaknik offer. Or if I'm not mistaken, there was a little bit of, not drama, but just like the chatter around the league was that Dave, kind of why he picked Mantis, seemed stupid. But it was more that Dave was 100% committed to trading him before he even had necessarily the value he wanted is a bit odd. So I think if Dave can get past that mindset, he could be more of a consistent like top 10 guy. But I think Dave is pretty set in his ways. He's been GMing for a long time. What you see is what you get. And like, you gotta love it. Anybody who's a consistent playoff appearance type of guy is great for the league. So we love to have Dave. So next up, in your final episode of the RBSL GM rankings, we will get to the good stuff. Everybody here, Dave was kind of a slight positive, I would say. Everybody below Dave, I would consider more or less in the neutral area. It's going to very quickly get very positive. I said the league is in a terrible state, and when I say that, it's just that there's a lot of GMs who are new or are not like clouded quite yet. But there's a lot of old heads, guys who have been around for a long time, who have been doing it very well. There's 11 of them, to be exact. They're all captured in this next episode. Their money, you might be on this list. You're still probably not as good as me, but you might be on this list. So stay tuned. I'll drop the next episode tomorrow. Love y'all. Stay breezy. Toodles.